you're on mute. Do I start? Or do you want me to wait for a few seconds more?
Let's start.
Do I start?
Yes.
Great. Wonderful. So a really good afternoon to you, everybody in here. This feels like home. When we address this network, it feels like family. You know, all the other webinars, we're just a bit nervous sometimes when it's for the outside, but for the Google News Initiative India Training Network, we are like family. So welcome in everyone back with Eoghan Sweeney. This webinar today on how to do online trainings was much needed. We should have done it a little bit earlier, but it's never too late. Just to take you back through the memory lane, it's been exactly 2 years since we started the GNI program. We started in July 2018, and Eoghan was there in the inaugural sessions and the TOT at that time. And he's been there since then with us. It's been wonderful. He's been guiding us, and Eoghan for sure needs no introduction. Just to give you the numbers that we've kind of achieved in the last 2 years, we've trained close to 19,000 people across India, which includes journalists, fact checkers, media students, everybody. You know, so this number is really huge and most motivating, and we've created a huge impact. The participating newsrooms for the trainings has been over 1,000. My colleague Shivali here has been updating the numbers on a daily basis, and the number keeps going up. We have more than 700 universities who've been a part of this fact-checking training sessions. And a big thanks to all of you out here who've made this impact, these numbers possible. You've done your best in every which way possible, and I just can't thank you enough. And from the entire team of data leads, thank you so much. Like I said earlier, Eoghan needs definitely no introduction, but of course I have to say a few words about him just to start the session. So Eoghan is an online investigation specialist and trainer who has over past decade helped establish, develop and support digital verification and fact-checking operations at media worldwide. Till date, he has provided training or talks in 27 countries across 5 continents. Wow, Eoghan, how do you even manage that? In 2018, that's when our GNI started. He founded OSINT Essential, which provided resources and expertise for online investigations and media literacy. With news agency Storyful, he was instrumental in developing techniques and workflows that transformed it from a startup to a recognized global industry leader and innovator. As Global Training Director at First Draft, he led the programs such as the creation of the Google News Initiative India Training Network, that's RGNI, the formation of groundbreaking Indonesian project Kick Fakta, and the training of journalists from across Germany to fight disinformation ahead of the federal elections. Eoghan has given talks and workshops for the Facebook Journalism Project, educational institutions, and international bodies such as the EU and the UN, and contributed to reports and documentaries for broadcasters including the BBC, ABC News, CNN, and RAI. Wow, that is quite an introduction, Eoghan. Thank you so much for taking out time. This workshop, this webinar today, it was absolutely essential and nobody could have done it better than you. So without wasting any more time, over to you, Eoghan. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Surbi, and thank you to everybody who's turned up for this. As always, I feel privileged and humbled to be part of this. It's incredible to see what has been done. People ask me, what I want to achieve out of these things. And the one word I would always sum it up in is impact. And you guys have had the most incredible impact. The numbers are amazing. The things I see every day in the WhatsApp chat and appearing on the websites of news outlets and so on, it's just been incredible to see. And please bear with me today because we're going to talk about doing online training. And as much as anybody else here, I'm not sure I'm the person to be doing this because I'm as much of a novice at online training as many of you. Yes, I've done bits and pieces in the past where, I haven't been able to go to places. I've talked to activist groups in Turkey. I've done an hour for the Express Tribune in Karachi and places that I can't normally get to. Occasionally, I have done online things. But I think many of you have done as much or more online training as I have, and I will address that in a few moments also, because I think when we have all this experience, all this expertise here, I hope that we're going to be having quite a lot of give and take, because I'm sure there are things I will address here, and you will either think of something I haven't mentioned, or you will think of possibly a better way than I've said of doing something. So please feel free to contribute. I am not the guru here. So I'm just going to put up the presentation here, and we will get going. Let me know when it's visible to you all.
Yes, Eoghan, we can see your screen.
Excellent. So what we are addressing is, of course, online training. Now, a lot of the stuff you will do the same as you have always done. It's just that there are measures, both technical and possibly in terms of delivery, that we need to tweak. Well, the first thing I want to say, as I said, was I'd like to get some give and take here. If we have questions as we go along, it's fine to put them into the Zoom chat, but I would love if people would use this board. You can see there's a short link there. The URL is case sensitive. There's also a QR code that can take you to it directly on your phone. And please, if you have questions, or not just questions, but also suggestions and ideas, please feel free to put them on that board. And I'll talk more about the app that I use for that later, because I find it very, very useful. If anyone here was in my workshop in December in Singapore, we use this to great effect. So there are three key areas I want to talk about when you're presenting online: audio, visual, and delivery. And there's a good reason I put audio first, because I think poor audio does more to bring down the impact of an online presentation than anything else, including visuals. So when you are trying to get your audio right, the first thing I'll address here is equipment. What do you use to get good audio? Now, the first thing, the thing that's most obviously available to everybody, is the built-in mic on your computer. The good of that, of course, is that you almost certainly have one of these, but the quality does tend to be poor. They're a bit of an afterthought for a lot of computer companies, and they're generally not at a distance that you have much control over either. So the quality of the built-in mic can be lacking quite badly. Some of you may have a separate webcam on top of the actual computer you have. Again, it's
Eoghan,
convenient.
I'm really sorry to interrupt. I'm really sorry.
Yes.
We can't see your next slide.
Okay.
We can't see the other slides. Yeah.
Okay, just give me a moment
It's
then.
still on the first one. Yes.
Here's a great example of when things don't go as they should. Now, let me just go for, can you see the next slide now? The one that mentions webcam.
I can see webcam, yes. The webcam
Okay, now I'm just going to go forward one so we can check if it's still going to work. Can you see the next one?
No.
Okay, let me move this into a different browser. Here we go, learning lessons as we go. I should talk about visual now, because you can probably see me blushing. This will be a great answer when people are asked, what did you learn today? Okay, can you see the webcam slide now?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Please take note what not to do. Okay, so with a webcam, again, the good thing is that it's convenient. If you have a webcam, most of them will have microphones, but again, they may not be of the best quality, because with a webcam, of course, when companies are making them, their main focus is on the visual, not on the audio. Now, quick check, Surbi, can you see the next slide?
Yes, headset.
Excellent. Okay, we're back in business. Okay, now a headset, one of the best things about a headset is that it is specifically aimed at audio. So the audio will tend to be good. And it's also very good at eliminating echo, because the mic is right there in front of your mouth, and you don't, you're not picking up a lot of the other noise from around you. The one thing I don't like about headsets is I don't think they look particularly good or professional. I often feel if I'm presenting with a headset on that I look like I'm in a call center and I should be telling people how to reinstall Windows 10 or something. So I'm not crazy about the look of headsets. I'm not opposed to them because I think they can be the best solution if you really are having difficulty with audio. Then desk microphones are very popular. If anybody here is doing vlogging or anything like that, desk mics are, of course, something that are used and tend to have very good sound quality. Again, this could depend on the actual model because getting a good quality desk mic can start to run up the expense, and also setup can be slightly awkward. You know, where do you put it? Suppose you want to have access to your keyboard or your mouse. I find that a desk mic can be slightly awkward because you could have it in a position in front of you that makes it awkward to type or to use your mouse. I use a separate mic, but it's up above my head. I have it clamped to a shelf, so that keeps it out of the way of my hands. Then you have lavalier mics, clip-on mics that you put on your lapel or on your shirt or wherever they fit best. Again, with these, the sound quality tends to be good and it is out of your way. It doesn't obstruct you in any way. But again, there are a lot of these out there that are very poor quality. So sometimes getting a good one could start to get expensive, and they can be slightly awkward in use. If you don't position them very well, they could rub against your clothing, they could rub against a beer or anything like that, and bring a lot of noise into your audio. So you've got to be careful with these again. So apart from the tech solutions, what should we do in terms of keeping our audio good? Your environment is very, very important because what is going into your microphone, if that's bad, you know the old saying, garbage in, garbage out. So if the actual sound going into your microphone is bad, it doesn't matter what kind of a mic you have, it's not going to make it better. So the main things I'm talking about are in terms of ambient noise other than what you actually intend to go into the mic. And then there's the thing of echo, which can really ruin the sound of a webinar or anything else that you're broadcasting. So when you want to deal with ambient noise, there are a number of things you have to look at. There is, of course, the noise going on in the house around you because we're all stuck at home now. There's external noise that is coming from beyond the bounds of your house, which of course you're going to have less control over. There's the noises you're actually making yourself, which people tend to forget about. And then there's the noise of the other participants on a webinar or call. So with household noise, what are the things we can do? Talk to people in advance. Make sure whoever is under the same roof as you knows that you are going to have your mic on and that you're going to be speaking to people, and try to tell people not to be shouting and screaming, hopefully not crying or anything else like that that will make lots of noise. And remind people it's not just about voices. It could be somebody vacuuming. It could be somebody turning on a smoothie maker. It could be somebody drilling holes in the wall, hopefully not. But make sure you remind people, because people tend to forget sometimes. They think they're not talking and suddenly they turn on a kitchen processor or something and suddenly this vibrates through the entire building. And if at all possible, I think most of us have seen this, try to lock the door. In fact, I'm not certain whether I've locked my door right now, but there's only one other person in the house. So, you could really do without the door opening and somebody walking in having just taken a shower or anything like that. So try to control your environment to that extent as much as you can. Then there's external noise. And the big problem with this is you have no control over it. If an ambulance goes down the street, or if somebody is running a pneumatic drill outside, or people are having a party in your yard, there's not really much you can do about this. You can't go out and scream at people or stop the traffic. The best you can do is try to block it out. And of course, yes, you can close your doors and windows and do whatever you can. Now, this does also introduce another slight risk, which is heat. This is something that affects me quite a lot. I'm not very resistant to warm temperatures. So once you've shut your doors and windows, you may have no airflow in the room. You can try turning on a fan, but some of you may have experienced this already. You may not think a fan is loud, but if it's blowing across your microphone at the other end, this can sound like a typhoon. you get this huge rumbling, gusty sound. And although you don't realize your fan is loud, everybody else is being disturbed by it. So if you think that it's likely that your room will be very warm and your fan or your air conditioner might make noise, try to plan well in advance, and for an hour or so beforehand, open up whatever windows you can, turn on whatever fan you can, and cross your fingers that the temperature will stay low while you're actually broadcasting. Then, of course, there are things like your own noise. A mouse banging or scraping on a desk can sound very noisy at the other end. Moving your chair to get more comfortable, the feet can scrape along the floor and make screeching noises. Again, you want to avoid this. Make sure to turn off all notifications. That just doesn't mean just on the computer you're using, but if you have a phone by you, if you have a tablet or something else, it's not great if they're buzzing and pinging and making all kinds of different noises during your broadcast. And then, of course, there's participant noise. So try to remind, if there are a lot of people who are actively in a hangout or a meet or whatever, just remind everybody to mute, because people are concentrating on what you're talking about. They may forget about their own environment, and people can be scratching beards or coughing or sneezing or whatever. So you got to make sure that nobody is making any external noise. Then, of course, there is the thing of echo. I've been on quite a few calls and hangouts and things where people have been plenty loud enough and quite clear, except for the fact that there's a huge echo coming from all around them. Now, the reason I have that bizarre picture there is this is something of anybody who has worked as a journalist who does a lot of audio. We all know somebody who has recorded their piece to send back to the studio under a blanket or something like that, because this does cut out echo. Now, that's fine, of course, if you're only dealing with audio, but if you need to be presenting visuals as well, I don't know if anyone's here is familiar with the movie The Blair Witch Project, but you don't really want to look like that when you're sending your piece back or when you're doing your webinar and scare the hell out of everybody who's on it. So what can you do about echo? Well, the first thing is try to take stock of what hard surfaces there are around you, because that's what sound bounces back from. You can do things like what I've done here, but this is basically for me an investment. I have put a lot of acoustic foam up around me, and that's sort of taking the nuclear option. I've covered a lot of the hard walls and things with this kind of foam. The one I use is more of a pyramid formation than what's in that picture, but it definitely makes a big difference in cutting out echo. But you do not have to do that. Any soft surface like a blanket or so on, anywhere you can cover things. When you're on a webinar, nobody can see the floor in your room, but that could be one of the things that echoing. Put a few blankets or rugs or whatever on the floor. Every little helps. Put something on the parts of the desk that you're not using. There are lots of things you can use like this. You can use blankets. You can use pillows and cushions. I'm not joking. Even big fat teddy bears, big fluffy ones. You put one of those on the desk or on the floor beside you. Any hard surface you can cover up brings you a little incremental improvement in the quality of your sound. This is a very useful tool, because what a lot of us do is we go into the Zoom or the Hangout or whatever first and ask other people, is my sound okay? But this is a very useful online tool. It's called SpeakPipe. And you can basically just go to the website, record yourself, and play it back immediately. And it's available at that URL or at the QR code there. So it's very straightforward. You hit the button, you record a few seconds of audio, and then you hit play, and it gives you the exact recording back of what you have just put into it. So having said all I can think of about audio, let's move on to visuals, the quality of what you're looking at. And I will say that I really do think audio is the big one that has the most potential to ruin what you're doing. One of the important things, of course, with webinars like this is that most of the time we will be screen sharing and hopefully not making a mess of it like I did at the start here. But a lot of the time you're not going to have to worry much about the visuals, because you're not going to be putting yourself up on screen an awful lot. But having said that, here's what we can do. Again, the camera you've got is probably good enough. It may not be broadcast quality, it may not be CNN, but it's probably good enough for presenting something like this. Unless, of course, I don't know if anybody here remembers Dell a couple of years ago. For some reason, they put the webcam at the bottom of the screen, right in front of the keyboard, and ended up what became known as the nostril cam or the finger cam. I had somebody who worked with me, and we had a constant rolling hangout going on. And every time Daniel logged in, all you could see was these enormous fingers. So if you've got one of those cameras, maybe you should think about trying to get a separate webcam, because Dell, for some reason, did that. I don't think anyone will ever do it again. Basics of your webcam. The first thing I say is remember it's there. Now, when I say remember it's there, I mean, don't be showing people the top of your head all the time. Make sure that you do occasionally glance directly at the camera or somewhere close to the camera. Remember that people are looking at you and that you shouldn't look like you're constantly avoiding their gaze. And check the height and the angle of it, because this will affect how you look and also how your background will look. The ideal height for a camera is slightly above eye level, because it does make you look a bit more alert. It makes you look like you're paying more attention, and certainly not looking at your fingers. Now, it is possible to get software that goes with webcams. Sometimes it will come packaged with the webcam. Sometimes you can get it separately. I'm not saying anyone has to get this. It's just one of those little things that can add and that can help out. And sometimes you can increase exposure, make the picture brighter or darker. You can increase contrast and so on. The one I tend to use these days is one called Webcam Settings. Unfortunately, I had to pay for this because my Mac is very, very old, and the free camera setting software that came with my webcam won't work in the version of OS X that I have to run. But I do find this helpful. It cost me about $8, I think. So it's something that only if you're going to take this quite seriously, I would recommend anybody look at. And then, of course, there is the matter of lighting. The important thing always is that softer light is better. It's more flattering. It casts less crazy looking shadows. The direction of the light can also be important, because you can have a very good bright light illuminating you, but if that light is directly over your head, you're going to get strange shadows under your nose, under your eyes. I think we've all done that thing as kids where you shine a flashlight up from beneath your chin and it makes you look very ghostly, when you don't want the opposite effect coming from above. And be wary of contrast. This is something I learned from working in TV, where I turned up one day with a black shirt on. I mentioned to Subi at the start of this that I'm slightly breaking one of my own rules. I'm wearing quite a dark shirt. Now, I've got very light skin. So be careful of wearing something that's much darker or much lighter than your skin, because the camera will try to even things out, and that may make your face look very dark or very bright. Natural light always tends to work best unless you're an absolute expert at studio lighting. Soft daylight is very flattering. It tends to flatten out your features and not cast too many nasty shadows. If you can have light coming in through a window, that would be very good. Now, if it's a very bright, very sunny day, you can close curtains. If you have net curtains, great. If not, just close them as much as you can and try to avoid the light coming directly onto you, because you end up with a huge bright spot. So you need to try to keep glare down as much as possible. Now, if you don't, or if you're doing this at a time of day where you don't have natural light, a few basic tips for lighting it yourself. We all have a few lamps or different things around the house, and having the light really bright is not the most important thing. Having it as even as possible is, so you don't have hot spots and dark patches, and you don't make your room look like a dungeon where you're very bright and the background is all dark and mysterious. And consider sometimes reflecting it off the wall or off another surface, because this tones it down, it diffuses and spreads it out and makes it look more even. So you can think about, I've even done things from time to time, if I don't have an actual reflector available, just pinning up a few sheets of white A4 paper and reflecting lights off that. This is something to play around with, but unless it's something you're very interested in, I wouldn't advise getting too obsessive about it, because arranging artificial lighting can be a very, very difficult and very frustrating process. Get it as good as you can and don't drive yourself crazy with it. I've spoke about contrast. So this is the kind of thing you have to be careful of. I mentioned clothing, where, you know, the difference between the shade or the brightness of your clothing and your face shouldn't be too different, but also watch out for your background. Do not backlight yourself brightly, or you're going to look like some criminal or other person being interviewed, because you're silhouetted, and you really don't want that. We've had it happen a couple of times in our calls where some expert or other comes on and they really look like they're trying to hide their identity because their background is so bright. And there is, of course, your environment. As I say, look behind you. I don't mean turn your head back and look behind you, but I mean be aware of what is actually behind you in the shot, because you could inadvertently have something. You don't want to have your laundry hanging up behind you or anything else like that. Boring background is a good background. You can have nice things in the background, but that also runs the risk of distracting people and having them wondering about you and psychoanalyzing you instead of actually paying attention to the presentation that you're making. Do we use virtual backgrounds? Yes or no? It's become a hugely popular thing, especially with the advent of Zoom. So I generally am not crazy about virtual backgrounds, partly because the quality right now is not great, and there tends to be this kind of fuzzy edge around you when you are doing that, and people can find it distracting or amusing. Now, if your workspace looks like the one in the picture there, I would say by all means go ahead, and if you can't get things tidied up, go ahead and use a virtual background. But do be wary of what kind of virtual background you want to use. I would say something simple, something straightforward. That's not my own picture. That's just taken from a stock site. And I would ideally be sitting in front of that bottle of air fresheners or whatever it is there. So just something straightforward, reasonably professional and tidy looking is okay. You don't want to have something like this, where people are more interested in how crazy you look than actually what you're saying or what you're teaching. Also, things like this can be awkward because while it does look like you're a big reader or whatever else, people are going to end up staring at this in great detail, trying to figure out what books are there and figure out, you know, things about your personality or about your lifestyle or whatever. So try not to have something that has so much detail that people end up paying more attention to that than they do paying attention to the webinar. There was an article recently talking about analyzing people on the basis of their bookshelves on their Zoom calls. And I thought it completely missed the point, because it was saying people inadvertently give clues about themselves by the books that are on their bookshelves. And I thought, no way. Any book that you can see behind somebody in a Zoom call has been put there intentionally. Now, sometimes it can't be helped. There are times where maybe your bandwidth is poor, maybe you're just unlucky and your picture is not coming out as well as you would like it to. Try not to panic about this. Like I say, it's more important that the quality of your audio is good. But when your picture is not turning up well, just try whatever you can. Use the best connection you can. Usually your wired connection will be better than your wireless, so try to use that if possible in the workspace that you're in. Do try restarting. I've had it from time to time where I look all fuzzy and blurry on a Zoom call or a Hangout, and I just restart the call or the Hangout, and for some reason I get a better connection and the picture turns out better. Also try rebooting the entire computer. Sometimes these things help. If nothing helps and you still look fuzzy or whatever, just apologize briefly to people and carry on. People are generally quite charitable about this and won't condemn you for small problems. So when you're presenting, I would advise presenting the deck in what I call a clean browser. So one where you don't have a whole lot of background tabs open, you don't have a whole lot of the extensions that you use open, and you don't have all your bookmarks available. Because again, this can be distracting. People are looking at those things instead of looking at the actual presentation. One way of doing this is to use a separate Chrome profile. I'm not sure if everyone's aware of Chrome profiles, but we can talk about that later. Or just use an entirely separate browser. Use Firefox or Brave or Safari or whatever you want. But keep in mind that if you are using a separate profile or browser, if you do need to be logged in to use your Google Slides or to use anything else, make sure you've done that beforehand. Then with screen sharing, here's where I fell down today. With screen sharing, familiarize yourself thoroughly with all the options for screen sharing. I would normally say that sharing a window is the best option, because if you share an entire screen, there is a possibility that you could put unwanted content up there. You could put up your messaging service or anything else without meaning to. Sharing a single tab can make things awkward when it comes to switching, because if you want to demonstrate something to somebody, you may have to stop your screen sharing, switch to the relevant new tab, and go back in again. So when you share a window, it generally works a bit better, because you can flick between tabs and you get an uninterrupted change, I should say, on your screen share. Then there's the question of interaction. Make sure that people are aware before you start if you have any specific ground rules for questions or interruptions. And do consider using a shared board like the one I mentioned earlier to avoid people interrupting. Because one of the problems we have sometimes with questions is that people ask a question and you feel like you should answer, and then you look at the question and you realize, and you have to tell them, oh, actually, I was just coming to that. So you may get asked a question about something that you are going to explain anyway in a few minutes. So that's why it's better to try to get these questions onto somewhere where they can all be collated and dealt with at the end. This is the one that I mentioned to you earlier, Padlet. And I like it. There are alternatives, which I said down there, Google Jamboard or Miro, which are good. I find that they give you a little too much. And the one thing I like about Padlet is it's very simple. It's very intuitive to learn how to use it, and it's free. And you only get 3 boards free. But what you can do is once you're finished one project or workshop, you can just delete the board from that one and you can use it again. So here's just an example. This is the one from our workshop in Singapore, where we were getting lots and lots of not just questions, but also ideas and suggestions and so on. And if it does come to the point that you're finished with this and you won't use it again, but you think there are lots of things here that you might want, you can then download this entire board as a PDF. And the good thing about that is you not only have all the text, but if there were links there, the links remain live in the PDF. So you can save an entire board from a session like this and have access to all the information, all the ideas and suggestions and so on. Or if there's a question that you didn't get around to answering, you can get back and answer that question later. So I do find it a very, very helpful tool, particularly when we're online and maybe we can't keep going and checking the message section, looking for questions and flicking back and so on. So that's where it is, at padlet.com, or it is at the QR code also. Then some brief things that I think everybody's aware of anyway on presenting. Try to look professional, try to be dressed reasonably formally, or at least smartly, shave, whatever else you need to do. So just look like you know what you're doing and that you should be there. Avoid speaking too fast or rambling off the subject. Now, what qualifies as rambling or what qualifies as illustrating or giving some anecdotal facts is quite flexible, but there can be a temptation, particularly in online sessions like this, to talk possibly too much because you can't see your audience. And it's the thing I find the most difficult about presenting online, because I love standing in a room where you can look at people, you can watch for things in people's eyes and their body language, and you can see whether somebody's following or not. You can slow down, you can speed up if you really think people are fine with it, or you can introduce anecdotes from experience that give them a richer idea about it. You can't do a lot of this when you're online. So a lot of the time you're left to judge this for yourself, and it is very tempting to talk too much. I always say to have a pen and paper at hand, because sometimes you will think of something that you want to address later, or you will see maybe a little spelling mistake on one of your slides or something like that. You can always take a mental note and say, yeah, I'll get back to that later. You probably won't. I found this from experience, where I saw a typo in one of my slides and I told myself, oh, better fix that. And a week later, I had the same typo there again. So if you can just have some scrap paper beside you. Take note of anything like that. It's there for you at the end when you have more time and a little bit more latitude to handle it. And that's all I've got for you right now. Like I said, we have a lot of people here with a lot of experience and expertise, and I would really be interested in hearing if there's things that I haven't mentioned there, if there are better ways people have of doing these kind of things. As I say, please use the board, but also I'm happy now to sit and take questions or equally suggestions and advice for as long as necessary.
Great. Thank you so much, Eoghan. That was a wonderful session. Now that our entire network is doing online sessions and webinars and training sessions, I think today how to do online training session of yours is going to come extremely, extremely useful. There are a few things that we tend to avoid or ignore, or we don't know of them so much. But I'm sure after the session of yours, we're going to take a note of it, all of us here, and ensure that the next training sessions we do, we will incorporate all those. So let me just quickly see if our network has any questions, or they are still banking on getting back to you via the WhatsApp chat. Just give me 1 second and I'll see how. All right, so it's from Sambit. Sambit is saying, hi, Eoghan. It's always refreshing to hear from you. Thank you so much, Sambit. Could you please talk a little about how you handle the demonstration of tools online?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Sambit. It's somebody who I keep an eye on a lot because he's producing some great resources and materials also. So very happy to have you here. Demonstration of tools online. I generally, like I said about the screen share there, I try to share a window. Now, please ignore the mess I made of that today. But I generally try to share a window because, as I say, what that does is it allows you to flick over and back between the tabs in the browser that you're using to present with. Demonstrating tools online, there is, of course, always a risk that something will not work at the time that you need it to work. And, you can use that as what I call a teachable moment. You can use that to explain to people, these are free tools. So be aware of more than one tool that can do this, because there will be times when they don't work.
So the next one, Eoghan, is from Minati. She's saying, I'm just curious to know, where should one keep the camera? I think you've pretty much covered it, but do you still want to talk about it, Eoghan?
If you're talking about where you should position it, my camera is, if I would say my eye level is here, my camera is about this high, and it's actually on top of my screen. And I think, just as I say, slightly above eye level, quite central, is the best position for it. Now, you do have some latitude with that, as long as it's not like way over there or up there or down there. As long as it doesn't make you come out looking really weird, it's generally okay. So somewhere where you don't appear to be contorting yourself or doing anything strange is really the answer to that.
Thank you so much, Eoghan. So the next one's from Jatin, who says, apart from your broadcast quality voice and the acoustics foam that you're using, what else is it that you're using right now for this quality of output? So what's the secret, Eoghan?
I'm glad to hear that my sound is going well.
Yeah.
No, I do think projecting your voice is helpful. You should always speak a bit louder than you think you need to, because look, if you're speaking too loud, people can always turn down their volume. If you're speaking too quiet, it's very difficult for them to get more. I have tried to, as I say, the wall that I'm facing, I have about 2 meters of acoustic foam along it. If anyone is actually interested in that, it's generally quite easy to get, and it's not terribly expensive. The one piece of advice I'd give about it is, if you're getting it, try to find out how it's packaged and delivered, because there's a lot of it coming in cheaply from China, and it's packaged compressed. And you don't know how long that's been compressed in a warehouse. And I've heard people who get it delivered and they unroll it and they're told to give it 2 days to completely decompress. And eventually it doesn't sometimes, because it's poor quality and it's been compressed for months on end. So if you are trying to see if anybody delivers it just uncompressed. Now that means you end up with a very big package, but it's better in the long run. But like I say, you don't need that. You can put a small mattress against the wall. You can hang a quilt over a chest of drawers or anything that's hard. And again, with the hard surfaces that are close to you. So on the table beside you, put a cushion there. It may feel awkward, and you might even think it looks awkward. But remember, most of this is going to be off camera. It's like, when I worked in TV in a hot studio, it was very common for us to have a very nice shirt on top and be wearing a pair of shorts and sandals, because that didn't matter. So you can have things a little bit weird, and they can be off camera, so nobody's ever going to notice. The other thing is, I do have quite a good microphone because I do a little bit of filmmaking as a hobby anyway. And I have a mic that costs me about $35, $40. But it's actually, I'll show you. It's here.
Nice. Oh, wow.
And I have that on, actually, let me move my camera. I'll try not to give anybody vertigo here. But I have it clamped to a shelf above me.
Wow.
And I have it on an arm. So it comes out like this. Sorry, I'm showing you my whole apartment now. So there it is. But the result is that it's, as I say, again, slightly above my head, and it's about 30 to 40 centimeters from my mouth. So yeah, trying to get the microphone close to you is good. But then again, for a while I was trying to use a desk mic. And as I said, I was kind of having to do this reach around the desk mic to get at the keyboard. And I was almost knocking over the mic at times. So that's when I decided to get this clamp and just fix it almost directly above me.
Great. I mean, thank you so much for showing up across your equipment. I mean, we would love to hear more about it. I don't know how the earphones work, but would you like to say something about the earphone? I mean, that's my question. Are they clear? Should we avoid them? Are the headphones better? Or
yeah, the advantage of earphones in general, the technical advantage of earphones is that they are very good for preventing feedback, because depending on where your sound is going in and where your sound is coming out, if they're from two different sources, there is a possibility that the sound coming from your speaker may feed back into your microphone. And we've all had this bizarre wah, 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 wah thing where you get this big loop of feedback. So earphones are good for preventing that. I prefer not to appear on a webinar with wires hanging down here. It's personal preference. It's an aesthetic thing. But if you find that it improves your sound quality, then I think that's more important than what people are going to think when they look at you.
Thank you so much. So sorry about my being hanging around my neck. I'll keep it in mind the next time.
And actually, the good thing there is you've got dark clothing and you've got dark...
yeah, so it pretty much matches with my outfit. Yeah, great. So all right. So the next one's from Monica, and a very interesting one. She says, how do we know whether the participants, they are active or sleeping?
This is a very good point. It's not one I think I'm going to have a perfect answer to. When you're not in the same room as people, there's only so much you can do to control their behavior or to monitor their behavior. I definitely do not like the thing that Zoom had, where you can be told whether somebody is paying attention or not, or whether they're in another tab, because I find that horribly intrusive. I think all you can do is appeal to people from time to time and, say, if there's anything you don't follow about this, please feel free to put a question on the board or so on. And that could jog people a little bit. You could modulate the tone of voice you're using from time to time, speak a bit louder just to jolt somebody back into presence. But yeah, it's limited how much you can actually do.
Yeah, I know. It could be quite a task because it's not a live audience. So we don't really know whether people are paying attention or not. Or, we could be boring to an extent that people could really doze off. But over again, this is another question from my end. There are a lot of times we feel that we should start taking the question answers in the middle, somewhere maybe we can open it to the audience. What is a better format for you? Because if we take the Q&A in the middle somewhere or halfway through the session, we kind of include the audience. We ensure that they are participating as against towards the end. But again, contrary to that is that we break the flow of the presentation. So what works better for you?
I think there are merits in both approaches. I do think it depends largely on your audience. Like today, you know, I'm happy to take everything at the end because I know this is an engaged audience who are actively interested in the topic and who all have a record of you know, doing this stuff themselves. So I think in that case, it's fine. But if you are dealing with, for example, students, maybe you need to do your question sessions more often. As long as you do them reasonably regularly, what you don't want is questions pinging in willy-nilly all over the place and disrupting the flow of everything. And as I say, questions that you were going to answer anyway. So you need to watch out for that. I think, again, like I say, evaluate who your audience are, how much stimulation you think they need, and how many little wake-up calls you think they need. So I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all.
That's true. Absolutely. I mean, of course, depending on the audience, like you said, could differ from students to the audience, kind of audience that we have our network here today. I don't think we have any more questions. And
I think we have a couple of things there. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we have another one here which says that from Anubhuti. I was about to ask that to Anubhuti, but thanks for putting it in here. Which platform do you feel is the best for the webinar or on an online conference?
All other things being equal, I'd say the platform you're most comfortable with. But, I would say stick to a few of the majors, not because they are majors, but because they've been around and have a little bit of a track record. I did steer clear at first of Zoom, and the reason for that being not because I work with Google, but because you had this mass uptake of a very new platform. And sure enough, suddenly these questions about security and privacy started to come out. And that's not necessarily because Google is better than Zoom or Zoom is worse than Google. It's because when something is new like that, it may not have undergone the same level of scrutiny. So I rather, when these platforms have matured a little bit. And the reason I would be happier using Google Meets very often is, again, not because I work with Irene, but because it has been so widely used for so long that it's undergone huge scrutiny. And what problems there are, we are at least more aware of them. So I would tend to say, when something mission critical like a webinar, try to go with the mature platform. I am curious whether anybody's been using Geo. And
we want to know that too.
And again, I have the same worries about Geo that I had about Zoom at the start, that Geo may be perfect, it may be fantastic, but we just don't know yet because it hasn't been scrutinized enough, it hasn't been used enough.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. So there's
there
another one from Taha.
There are a couple of other ones there I can see, Surbi, which you might have not spotted. Somebody asking whether I've redesigned the content for online use.
Yeah.
Not radically. I have tried to put a little bit more visual emphasis on it, even if it's just little icons and things to keep people's attention, because definitely reams of text can put people off to sleep. And if you're not hopping around the room like you've seen me do in seminars, you don't have the same opportunities to keep people paying attention. So I would say definitely a little more visual content. From time to time, something a little bit funny or arresting can be useful because it encourages people to keep watching and keep paying attention just in case they miss the joke. So, there's a slight bit of visual performance going on with webinars because you need it, because you can't be walking over and back across the floor and you can't be shouting or whatever, all this crazy stuff I do to try to keep people engaged. And Shweta,
I think it is a similar thing. I think she's also asking a similar thing, that should we have more exercises during the sessions? How do you, do you suggest that we should have, give the audience some exercises during our sessions?
Yeah, I did a couple of very busy webinars. When I said busy, but like with 70 people in them, and ones that went on for 4 or 5 hours recently in Thailand. And I have created some online exercises, and I can very happily give you guys links to those, just where I put them on my website. Some of you may have seen one I've done before where it's a little bit of a competitive one where we've had teams competing. I don't think that's great when you're online. But what we did in Thailand was I created pages with some rather straightforward exercises. And we then created 4 more Hangouts, and we split the groups. And we sent them off we gave them the links, and we said, okay, you guys are in Hangout A, you're in B, C, and D. And we sent them off into those and said, we're back in the main Hangout in 90 minutes. Be prepared to come back and explain whether you've got these correct and how you did it. So then we had a session at the end of the teams explaining how they did it. Because in each of those Hangouts, there were only 5 to 6 or maybe 10 people maximum. Again, I'd say not to have too many people in any of them, but it is a way of doing it, and it worked very well for us. We were surprised how well it went in Thailand.
Wonderful. I mean, that's a great idea, and I will be happy to get the examples from you if you can do it anytime that's convenient with you. And Jatin possibly has a similar one. He was asking, can we give them picture verification exercises without losing the grip on the session?
Yeah, I think, yes, it's good to do that, but again, you're not able to look at people. You're not able to, you've been in my ones where I'm running around looking over people's shoulders, giving hints and things like that. Of course, you can't do that online. So I would say, again, give them a very specific target and give them a very specific period of time, and, tell them, okay, at 20 past the hour, we're back discussing this. Whether you're doing it in the one you're in now, or, as I said, you're setting up extra mini Hangouts for it, then I do think it's a good idea. I think exercise is a huge part of teaching people anything, and it's good to have ways of doing this online. I will send on, quite quickly after this, I'll send on an example of how we did in Thailand and how well it worked.
Thanks, Owen. So Shweta is saying that if we're doing it on the mobile, sometimes maybe our laptop is not handy. Do you think we need a tripod or a mic, etc.? Or don't you think it's looking at people, even if they are in a window, we connect with them better? What do you suggest in vis-a-vis a laptop and a mobile?
Yeah, I would say if you're using a mobile, one of the good things about it is that mobiles are designed for voice communication. Okay, maybe less so in the days of smartphones, but they tend to have very good microphones. So I think that's one advantage of it. I do think, of course, it can be a little bit fiddly and awkward trying to do everything on a 5.5-inch screen. So that is something you have to be concerned with. But again, it's what you're comfortable with. If you're very practiced at doing this on a mobile, you may be very good at doing it. So I think, yes, trying to look at people definitely does give a little bit more of a personal touch. You don't want to be constantly staring into your camera and freaking people out, but from time to time, being able to take a glance at the camera when you're speaking to people is good. Again, you have to think about with your Hangout, do you set it up in such a way that while you have the slides being shared, you still have the people on the screen? I've seen people forget sometimes that when they're sharing their screen, they're still visible to people. And I've seen people, scratching or stretching or whatever, not realizing that you are still there, even if it's just in a thumbnail. So
yeah, and it's quite a distraction, actually.
Yeah.
So Simon is saying it's a similar thing about the quiz. I think you've already covered it. That do you think you should include a quiz during a part of a presentation?
Yeah, I think it's a possibility. I've thought about trying to use Kahoot for this, but I haven't actually done it yet. So I'm not sure if anybody wants to get together and try that out. See if you can do something like a Kahoot quiz.
Kahoot or a Mentimeter, I'm not sure. I mean, we are also trying to incorporate it as a part of our presentation, but if someone tries it sooner than us, please let us know how it works. We would like to experiment with it. So, so Joydeep, all right, so he's saying, Joydeep is saying, hi Owen, it's indeed an enlightening session. Can you please suggest some easily available audio and video tools which are easy to handle too?
Yeah, that's an interesting one also. I would say I'm generally reluctant to go messing with audio tools, particularly live ones. There are some that I've tried. There's a tool that I've used. It's only available for Windows, so I won't be using it on my Mac, but which you can route your audio through this tool and then reduce echo or things like that. I do find it can be an awful lot more work than simply improving the environment in which you're broadcasting. And every time you introduce an extra piece of technology into the chain, you may be introducing a link that can break. So please, if you're comfortable with using those kind of tools, by all means do so, but just be aware that simple is always better.
True that.
In terms of avoiding gremlins.
No, absolutely. I completely agree to the fact that it's always better to be simple rather than get confused and fiddle between tools. But if you have any
Murali
personal...
Murali has mentioned Audacity, which is a very good tool. Now, I use that for pre-recorded stuff very often to clean up echo and ambient noise and things like that. But I'm very wary of using things like that live.
Great. So one of them is asking, have you redesigned your content for online, or you use the same
I think I mentioned that already.
Yeah,
that's what I was talking about, using more visual content.
Great.
Purnima has asked about if I announce a break. Yeah, I generally ask people if they want a break, but sometimes, depending on the audience, again, I don't do that because, for example, in Thailand, it's a cultural thing that people aren't assertive about stuff like that. So if you ask, does anybody want a break, you just end up with nobody answering. So sometimes I will impose a break. On online stuff, I generally try not to keep the breaks too long because you're always terrified of your connection dropping or somebody's connection dropping while you're on the break. Again, you should keep them very strict in terms of, we're having a break now, we will start again in 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and you need to keep strictly to that.
Yeah, because this is an online session. Sometimes I think it also happens that once we give a break, the people don't come back, they don't join, or possibly, I mean, they're there as a part of the session, but, they haven't actually joined back. So
that's and you can't be going out into the lobby and rounding people up like we do in real life sessions.
Did I miss any questions, Owen, in here?
I see Murray also mentioned Shotcut, which again is very good for video. Ashok asks how to handle network issues during the online session. Well, that one is largely in the lap of the gods, isn't it? Because we don't have any control over that. I would say, try to make sure that you can plug into your LAN rather than depending on your wireless network. Now, I know there are places in some parts of the world where sometimes the wireless network is stronger than the wired one. So if that is the case, please do it that way. But just try to figure out which one is more consistent and reliable and use that. And as I say, at that point, you just cross your fingers.
Yeah, I also suggest that you keep your mobile hotspots also on, because sometimes it's easier to switch. I personally feel that sometimes in India, because of the power failures, your internet could go up and down. But if you have your mobile hotspots running, so at least you can switch very easily without taking a lot of break.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's kind of what I had in mind, actually. The funny thing is, the one time where I had to actually do an entire presentation for an hour over my mobile hotspot was actually in the European Parliament. Their Wi-Fi broke down, and I ended up, standing in front of the European Parliament saying, "Yes, and this presentation has been brought to you by Vodafone."
Yeah, I mean, I personally realize that sometimes even your hotspot really works, on a crisis situation or a place where your network isn't working.
Yeah.
So I think we've pretty much covered everyone, just in case.
Oh, sorry. Shweta mentioned using Google Classroom to make quizzes. Yeah, that's good. And actually, if you go to Google Forms, I wasn't aware of this until quite recently, that if you're making a Google form for like a questionnaire, that there is actually an option there to make this a quiz. So you can create quizzes in Google Forms. You can also do it in Microsoft Office Forms. So those kind of things are also possibilities.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So guys, everyone, in case there's anything, just please quickly post in here. And I know that you know that you already have an access to Owen on the WhatsApp group. So you might just reach out to him one-on-one on that group. That's also perfectly fine. And Owen will, of course, help us with the list of examples that he was saying and anything else that comes into his mind to help us do our online sessions better. But thank you so much. So, we have Shivali also joining in here today with us, and she's an expert again. She's been organizing all the online trainings for most of us here. So, she's better equipped than me actually so Shivali, do you have anything to add in here for the network, for our people here to be better prepared? Do you have anything to say to us?
Well, I guess the expert has said it all, and I don't really need to add anything, and there won't be anything more to say. But just that, yeah, these tips were actually very, very, very useful. The tools that Owen has mentioned are very useful. Some of them even I did not know. I might just use them the next time. And yeah, I'll in my online guidelines maybe add a few more things for our trainers to which would help them to do online training. And yeah, thank you so much, Owen. Thanks
Yeah,
again.
thank you
Thank you for
so much,
having me.
Shivali.
And
Thank you so much, Owen. Yes,
And
of course,
thanks to the entire GNI network, people who've taken out time to join us today and be a part of this session. Thank you so much.
yes, a big thanks. Shweta is saying thank you so much, and so is everybody else. This session has been recorded, and Shivali, as usual, she will share the link with you. It's going to be as a part of your resource, and whatever that we get from Owen after this will also be shared with you. Please feel free to play it, replay it before you plan your next session, because this has been extremely useful even for people like us. I mean, I did not possibly do a lot of things that Owen mentioned today. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining in today. And let us know if you still have any questions. We are there in the group, so you have an access to us. Thank you so much, Owen. I can't thank you enough all the time. You've been
I have to go away now and figure out what the glitch is in Firefox that prevented my slides from changing properly at the start and incorporate that into my next presentation.
perfect. So you know how it works. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye, Shivali.
Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much.
Thanks,
Bye.
Owen.
Take care,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Bye-bye.